Hello, everybody. Good evening. Wash day. Hyoho. Yate. Hola. Manahu. Good evening. Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today is February 15th, 2024. And ACN Associates and us Aunties would like to welcome you to today's live event. It's so great to see you all here. We're so happy to be online and bring you some fun and talk about um, different things in the world and collaboration and working together to bring resources, information, community wellness to our community is very important to all of us. And we'd like to acknowledge our partnering organizations, Paul from Powerless.com, Native Muse Productions, that have made this event possible today. And we also want to thank you for watching now or in the replay. Thank you for checking in, watching, commenting, sharing. Don't forget to join us in March on March 7th at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time, where we will also be going live. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to have you here, and we are going to be bringing on the different individuals that make this event possible. So give me a moment and we will bring them on. Jennifer, Justine, I know you can bring yourself onto the camera. So if you can do that now. Here we go. There we are. Yay!
Hi.
Hello.
We're here. We made it.
So we're going to go ahead and have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll go into our show.
I know I'm next, but I'm kind of nervous because I do want to practice my Ho Chunk introduction. I've been doing some learning on my languages. Hi, everyone. My name's Justine Medina. Let me go into my first introduction. Ho Chunk Rajara Vihiga Hinigaire. Maheta Rajara Justine Ga Hinigaire. Waka Hikara Hija Washanak. Hi everyone, my name is Justine Medina. My Ho Chunk name is Viha, and my English name is Justine, and I'm from the Snake Clan. And I'm calling out from Lonely Territory out in San Francisco. I'm currently the program manager at Indigenous Journalists Association, but my hat is like as an auntie and just having conversation amongst y'all. And I'll pass it off to Jennifer.
Awesome. I have little tears, teeny.
I know.
I'm already starting out emotional. I'm the emotional one. I'm so proud of you, and it makes me so happy, and like I'm so inspired to want to learn more of my language, and I hope you feel supportive. I hope you feel like the love, and it just really makes me happy. You know that scene in Reservation Dogs when all the people are behind them? Like I felt that, and they were all so happy for you. So I'm so grateful for that you could bring that moment to us.
Yeah, we started off strong. I'm all gonna cry too, just because like we're all grown up. And like now that I know it, but yeah, go ahead.
Skiktash, Aninap Chikik, Jennifer Varenchek, Aniot hello everybody. Excuse me while I wipe my tears here. My name is Jennifer Varenchek. I'm from the Tohono Nation, and I am coming to you live from the illegally occupied Kingdom of Hawaii. And I am on the island of Oahu, and I live in Kaneohe, and I'm just really happy to be here today. This is such a place where I come to like receive joy and to get updated on like what's going on in Indian country. And of course, I love being able to talk to my dear friends here, and that we're able to invite guests on and like learn more. And so I'm so excited to be here. I am going to lead us into our prayer. And so let me get my sage here. I have my shell, and I'm going to do a prayer for us. We have just the most wonderful show. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, you guys, you can't see it. What I'm doing. Let me sage us. Creator, thank you so much for this opportunity, for allowing us to come together. Oh, Creator, it feels so good to be Indigenous. It feels so good to hear our words in our languages. And I'm just so grateful for today and this space that you have, this technology that we're able to access so that we can connect and learn from each other and laugh from each other. I ask that you bless this time that we are together, that we all are able to come with open ears, open minds, open hearts, and that the words that we share are good words, words that will uplift and will educate and bring joy to those that are listening. And I'm just, again, just want to say I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Oh, Dr. Say. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
I'll go ahead and go into our land acknowledgement. Thank you, Jennifer, for the beautiful prayer. Before we get started, we want to make sure to acknowledge the land that we are on. I myself am a settler on Ohlone territory, and I just want to take a moment to honor the Ohlone people and their ancestors that took care of the land and continue to take care of the land that I currently reside on. So please take a minute to acknowledge the land that we're on, and feel free to share the chat where you're calling it from.
Are we frozen? No, we're not frozen. Okay.
I thought you said take a moment, so I'm taking a moment.
Okay. I was taking a moment too, but I didn't know how long our moment was.
Well,
And it's
moment
raining
over.
and windy. It's raining and windy over here, so when it is, it's like my internet is a little bit like not that great, and so I wasn't sure if I was frozen or not.
That was our moment.
It's a good moment. Good moment.
Good times, good times.
So we have a special guest today, do we, April?
Yes, we do. And we're going to bring her on. And let me tell you, I am new to TikTok. So I wish we could stream this on TikTok too, but we're having a little bit of other issues with other areas. So the best area to get this on right now is Facebook, not Facebook, because Facebook's having some issues. But the best place to get it right now is YouTube and LinkedIn. So if you have those two areas, then I would suggest having everybody watch on LinkedIn and YouTube. But hello to LinkedIn and hello to YouTube. And thank you for allowing us to stream with no problems on your platform. So I am new to TikTok, like I just said. And we initially were going to go with another guest or other guests, and they weren't able to be here. And as I was watching TikTok, you know, there's a lot of different individuals that I follow on that platform, and this one individual just is like a world traveler. She's like a superstar to me. She like talks about scholarships and just being a bad A person just in your own right. And I thought, man, I should just reach out to her and see if she wants to be on our Sissies, Uncis, and Aunties platform. The worst that she could say is no, or not even say anything. Um, so I asked her, I DM'd her, and I asked her, and she was like, "Sure, yeah, I'll be happy to." I was so excited, like overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, this big old superstar is gonna come on our little platform and spend time with us, visit with us, and I was so excited. So we're gonna go ahead and have her come on and have her introduce herself, Dr. Mandy. Woo!
Magawati sa hopa kauti sa shashka tana hanu sa she sao hopa where we shot Australia matzani. I just introduced myself in our traditional language called Keres, spelled Keres. In the old boarding school files at Carlisle Indian School, it's spelled Queres. So it's really interesting as I learn our history about our people and our community, how things have changed from just our ancestors going to school. I'm a big, huge fan of sharing with students and families that, especially our Indigenous communities, that college can be an option for our community members. And so I'm from Laguna Pueblo, and I come from a long line of my relatives going to school and getting advanced degrees. So I'm so honored to be here with all of you, and I just love sharing stories, and I feel very welcomed here in this space and in this community.
Awesome. Yay. We're so glad that you could make it. I'm going to go into just kind of letting you know how, so every month we come up with like a new topic. And this month was living in two worlds. And kind of how it came about was, for those that don't know, I was adopted and raised outside of the culture, and I didn't get to know more about my tribe and tribal history and just the Native community until I was an adult. And I was talking to my brother, who I was raised with since birth, and he is currently studying to be a part of EMT, like firefighter. And he went to a graduation in Los Angeles County. And it was the first time that he did a land acknowledgement. And at that time, he called me, and he was like, I just went to the graduation, and they did a land acknowledgement, and it was great, but you could kind of tell that, like, I think that they mentioned that this was their first time that they did it, and you could kind of like tell because it was a little bit like awkward and not necessarily like, it's kind of like you read it, okay, we did it, check, move on to the next thing. And so he was asking me, he was like what do you feel, like how do you feel about land acknowledgements? And like it's great, that they acknowledged that they were in the I believe they were in Fernandina Tataviam territory when they I think that's where the graduation was, although I could be wrong. And he said, okay, great. So like, yeah, this land belonged to them, but now what? Like, now what do I do? That's what his question was, like, what do I do now that I acknowledge that this was your land, but what do I do now? And so it kind of started a conversation amongst Averill and I and other Indigenous friends that I have about like, yeah, well, like, how do we feel about that now? Like, and now that it's become such like a, well, I can only say in my experience here in Hawaii and in California, it's kind of like a norm. It's kind of like it's a regular thing that you do whenever you have like a public gathering. I can't say that it's like that in other states, but I can only speak from my experience. But so that kind of like brought up the whole idea of like living in two worlds, how I guess a term is like code switching. And that's like where we wanted to start the conversation, which is, how do you feel about today's use of land acknowledgements, and what is their purpose and why are they done? Other than like, I feel like this is just a general question. There's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I know that there is a history of land acknowledgements, and when I talked to my brother that day, I talked to him about how I remember when it wasn't done in Los Angeles County during like important meetings, like not within the Native community, but within the outside the non-Indigenous community, like dealing with like city councils and stuff like that, and how they like integrated. But I would love to hear, people's take on it, thoughts on it, and then from there we can flow into like the rest of the conversation. But that's how it kind of like all came about. So jump in, whoever wants to.
I want to mention, thank you for the backstory about that. I was last year in October, I believe, I am a grantee for Return to Heart Foundation, and they asked me to go to Kentucky. They asked me to go somewhere. It was for a stakeholders meeting. It was the Walmart, where Walmart Corporation is. And I was there amongst other stakeholders, and I was there going to represent Return to Heart Foundation, but there were also other Indigenous people that were there. One from NCAI, and the other from the people that do RES conference. So we were in the stakeholders meeting, and they did a land acknowledgement. One of the things I wanted to say was, I'm glad that I wasn't the token Indian that was in the room, that I was answering for everybody. I'm glad that NCAI was there and RES was there, because once they did it, one of the other individuals from RES was like, thank you for doing that, but you really need to do research, because my tribe wasn't there, and my tribe is on this land that you're sitting on right now. So my thoughts of it is, yes, they might just be doing it, but before they never did it. So recognizing it, but what are the next steps that they're going to do? So I'm glad that they do it in Los Angeles. There was a long time individual that was here that was an elder, and she and I don't know why I'm losing her name right now, but it'll come back to me. And they put something together, and it was just words that, not words. It was words from elders, Gabrielino, and I was glad that they put it together, because it is something that should be done. It is being done by many. It might just be words, but then again, as they start to continually do it on a regular basis, I'm glad that people in the audience will correct them if it's wrong. That's it. The end. That's all I have to say. So the next person.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for increasing the visibility of our communities, and I think that happens in so many different platforms. So I think land acknowledgements are essential to the very fabric of corporations and institutions, and should be integrated. So I'm in the realm of education, higher education, the college, and recently I visited Dickinson College, which is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And for those that may not know, Carlisle is significant to our Indigenous community because many of our Indigenous youth were taken there or sent there in the 1800s all the way through the 1900s. And that Carlisle Indian School was like it served as the blueprint for a lot of other boarding schools that came after that. So it was a significant place. But I recently went to their website and I saw their land acknowledgement, and I will tell you, this is probably the most impactful land acknowledgement that I've seen. And I'll tell you why. Here's the condensed version, so I'm just gonna read it real quick. It says, Dickinson College is on the unceded lands of the Susquehannock Nation. We acknowledge the many Indigenous people that lived with these lands, as well as the thousands of Indigenous children forced into the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in 1879 as part of a federal cultural eradication effort. And when I saw that land acknowledgement, it acknowledged, well, one, what land you're on, but then two, how that organization, institution played a role in our communities. And in this case, it was, how this college actually played a role to help with the eradication of our Native people. So I thought that that was so raw, but very professionally well written within this context of an institution. So I think that that is a stellar example of what a land acknowledgement should look like. So I'm a huge proponent for it, but knowing that the next question is, so how do you go further than a land acknowledgement? That's always the next question, right, for these organizations and institutions. So that's kind of my take on it.
I love that. And I think that's what my brother was asking, was like, okay, but now what? What do I do now? And I didn't really have any answers for him, because I have always been like just advocating to do it, kind of just like, it's important that you acknowledge, right? That's in the name itself, acknowledge that this land has been taken and settled by others. But then, yeah, what's the next step? So I guess, like, what happens after, like, what's going to be the next thing, before the first step was the land acknowledgement. What's the second step? And I don't have an answer for that, but I'm excited because we have become more present in the media. We are becoming, more just present in general. And I think that the more that we are present, the more that the rest of the population will be able to easily accept whatever the next step is. And again, like I said, I don't know what that next step is.
Yeah. I also think it's awkward being asked that. What's the next step? Like, that's our, job to do. I'm like, well, what do you think? But this reminds me of that one video. I don't know if y'all remember, but it's like the theater and that lady does a land acknowledgement and like people in the crowd. So what are you doing? Are you giving money back to to Native organizations? They're like, nope, no, we're not. But like, that I thought that video was really great to think about what are, those next steps. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say is sometimes it's awkward when that question comes to me. And then, and just that video comes to my mind.
I love that video. Because it starts with, like, she gets up and she's like, oh, okay, so I'm going to go then, because this isn't our land. So I'm going to go. And they're like, no, the show. Okay, so then you cancel the show. So that's a good one.
That's a good one. Julia Bogny is the name of the individual that I wanted to recognize and make sure that I state her name, because she did help a lot with starting the land acknowledgement here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was Julia, but I let it go. Definitely, she was very big in the Los Angeles community, and she left a big, a tear in our community fabric when she passed, but she also left a legacy where many of us have learned so much from her.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to also put it in, individuals that are watching, please feel free to engage in the comments and let us know what you think about land acknowledgements. But I also want to go back to Dr. Mandy and Dr. Mandy. I'm going to go back to her and have us also speak on your platform, because it's a platform that I really connected with, and the things that you say, and I want to also give you some time to talk about that area as well before we go on to our next question.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I'm a huge advocate, again, about sharing Indigenous narratives in a very wide public platform. I think it's so important to fill many voids in our digital platforms. And again, I go back to the boarding school era, how that has deeply impacted me so much, where there's a photograph in Carlisle, the 1884 photograph, and it's a very famous photograph that students, it was the student photograph of over 300 students, and it's a black and white photograph. and it looks all like they have military uniforms on. It looks like very sad, very lonely. And that photograph really helped me perceive why I do what I do, because in that time, a lot of times our people were the ones that were being photographed. In other words, a lot of times our people's stories were being told for them, and they weren't necessarily the photographers. But now in this time, we have the cameras, we have the phones, so that we can tell our stories our way. So that's the why for me. That's why I share stories on a digital platform like TikTok. That's my primary platform. And I use TikTok. It's an easy way to engage with our community. And I understand that there's always a risk when you're vulnerable, because, I share a bunch of different stories. It's like a vlog in my life. I try to think about like what I go through as an Indigenous person. I think other people might go through it. So recently I've been like on this list kick, like top 5 things that you should know when you go to a Native dance, like, near a reservation, or top 5 things you should do as you start college this semester, like all these different lists, because I think about what I've learned and how I can share that with other communities. So at times I really love the engagement that I get from the community, because I'll get, direct messages about like, oh, hey, like I have a son going to college, what should I do? And so it's a really cool way to engage. Or there are a lot of questions too, is like, I believe that I have Indigenous ancestry. How do I go about this? And those questions are really hard for me, because I don't identify as that. Like I've always known where I've come from in our community. And so that really is interesting dialogue too. So I'm always like learning and trying to figure out how can I serve our Native community. So that's why I share stories, and it's a risk again, right? Because with our culture, you can just get canceled so quickly if you say something, right, that's not favorable or whatever, but I'll take the risk. I think it's worth telling our stories and being able to amplify our narratives as Indigenous people.
For sure. I'm glad that you are taking that risk. And I know that photo that you're talking about. I remember the first time I saw that photo, and I saw it with I don't know if it was the same kids, but like a photo, like I guess maybe when they first came and they were like in their traditional clothes, and then like the next photo was everybody, and it was just like, it's just heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with some people that were not familiar with anything that had happened with boarding schools, and it was too much to explain. I don't know if you guys have gone through that, but it's like it's too much, like, to take the time. And like, I know Averill and I talk about this all the time, about how like as being Native, sometimes we have to or we, at least the two of us, tend to like, if I'm going to tell you the story, I want to start from the beginning and make sure you fully understand everything. So I got to go like way back to like the backstory. And then sometimes to tell people like the whole entire thing, it doesn't seem like to give it justice, like just to give like a quick answer. So sometimes I have to take a step back and be like, I can't. It's because it's a lot of emotion and history, and if you are open to it, a lot of times people can feel all those ancestors like behind you. And I think that that's very powerful, but to explain it to someone who's not open to it can be very difficult. And also just not worth, like, for me, not worth like trying to convince someone who I know is not going to be convinced or listen. That's just my 2 cents, but thank you for sharing about that. April, really quick, I saw that there was a second question that you had put underneath there.
Yeah, did you want me to go to it?
Yeah,
The second question, right?
I think so.
Okay, just a moment.
I love this question. Who would like to? I've been talking, so how about Mandy? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll read the question, and then I'll go on my experience and then back up what you said. So the question is, what was your experience growing up in your area, and how does it compare to how you live now? So I don't think I introduced myself, so I'll do that now. Hiohomi Takiape, Ava Cordovi, Machiape, Malakota, and Taos Pueblo. My Thama is Joseph Conquilla Cordova. My Ina or my cause, Patricia Crow Cordova. I'm sixth generation from Chief Red Cloud. I'm the owner operator of AC and Associates. I'm a mother, daughter, community member. I'm a Unci, which means grandmother, and I'm honored to share space today with you. The question is, again, what was your experience growing up in your area, and how does it compare to how you live now? My experience growing up in Downey, California, which is a small suburb of Los Angeles County, um, was me, um, um, me being in a highly Hispanic area and um, living and being in the calle, the streets, being with Hispanic individuals. My dad took us back home to Taos. Well, he went back home to Taos every summer to do his things that he needed to do. They taught us. My mom is Taos Pup. My mom is Pine Ridge, from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Oglala, Lakota. My dad's from Taos Pueblo. So although they didn't teach us anything like words on a regular basis, they did teach us things, but not like if we were living back home. When we went back home, my dad went back home yearly. When we went back home, my dad was always pick up a broom, do dishes. There's always something that you need to do. Don't just be standing around doing nothing and waiting for somebody to tell you to do something. So living in Los Angeles, it was big city, fast pace, being in the streets, riding my bikes, coming in when the lights turned on, because that's what time we had to come in. There wasn't any real babysitters. My mom and dad didn't micromanage us, but we were outside having fun. We didn't have electronics and all that stuff to keep us busy. But now, as I introduce myself, my introduction is three. It's English, it's Taos Pueblo, and it's Oglala Lakota. So if somebody was in the audience that was Taos Pueblo, they would hear Taos Pueblo words. If somebody was in the audience that was Oglala Lakota, they would hear Oglala Lakota words. And that's because as a language warrior, as being in language classes, I'm pulling from the different parts of what makes me me. So growing up, I didn't have all of that. My dad would use small words with us, ta'a. My mom would use small words with us, small words. Ta'a means thank you. So he would use small words to tell us things, but it wasn't a full language class that I'm in now. He did teach us how to pray. He did teach us different things about what we do back home, or what he does. So um, when I went back home, I would always be proud of, I'm from LA, I'm from Los Angeles. And my cousin pulled me aside, rest in peace, he passed away. But my cousin pulled me aside and he was like, first of all, you're not from California. You're from Taos Pueblo. You live in California. So that made me feel a little bit less not of the know of Pueblo, because I can feel the same thing, not Indian enough to be Pueblo, not Indian enough to be in Los Angeles, not Indian enough to do this or do that, but I am Indian enough. It's just me that has to take the steps of being that much more Indian that I want to be, knowing my ceremony, knowing my language, knowing all of that. So as I introduce myself, certain people may not um, understand everything, but it's what makes me me. That's it. The end. That's the question. So I'm putting it out to everybody else. How do you feel? I'm sorry. What was your experience growing up in your area, and how does it compare to how you live now? I live now with prayer. I live now with sage. I live now with knowing where to go to pick medicine. I live now with knowing that I can pick up a phone and call my aunties and call my uncles, or call somebody that I need questions to. But I also live now with knowing that it just isn't that much easy, or isn't that much hard to learn what you really want to learn and what you really need to know to pass on to the next generation. And I live that way because I do have takojas. I do have grandchildren that I want them to understand they are Indian. They are Indian enough to do whatever it needs to be done. Okay, for reals, the end, and I'm going to pass it on to the next person to answer the question.
I'll let Dr. Mandy, I like how you say Dr. Mandy, take the question next. But I do want to ask though, did your parents meet in LA or did they meet somewhere else?
They actually, my mom came out on relocation, and she was a nurse, caddy corner at Good Samaritan, which is used to be caddy corner from the biggest largest urban agency, UAII. So the hospital that was caddy corner from UAII was the hospital that she worked in, and my dad was in the Navy, so he was here visiting, and they met at an Indian bar that everybody used to go to. And then, wait, real quick before I pass it over, going back to the original question, is that when I tell a story, I have to tell you this whole longo story to get to the point of what we need to get to. And I know me and Jen talk about this a lot, because some people would be like, somebody's told me before, you know, April, that story that you just told me took 20 minutes. You could have just got to the point. And I said, I'm not going to change me as a person just to accommodate you to get to the point. I'm going to tell you that big old long story, because the next time you're not going to be asking me questions of why I need to do that. So you either listen or don't listen. That's how I am. I mean, there's a longo story with people, you know, with different people. Some elders, they pray for a longo time and you have to sit there and listen. They, you know, tell these stories, but that's also a learning lesson with patience and listening and knowing and learning. So those answers the questions that you posed to me. So now I'm going to go to Dr. Mandy.
Awesome, thanks. I enjoy hearing your stories. And I'm reminded when we talk about relocation, like how the different policies within the government have impacted our communities, have just changed the face of our communities in many different ways, and where people grew up and where people are connected to. And for me, I am connected to Laguna Pueblo, and that's where we have villages there. I'm from the village of Pichi or Powati, and since I grew up there, I was very connected and very well knit into our community until I was like 6 or 7. Then we moved off the reservation and moved around in New Mexico. But when I think about and conceptualize where I've lived and how I've gone about, the roaming the earth, I think a lot of it about two different analogies that help me kind of think about this. One is I think about that my life is like the salmon. I really identify with the life of a salmon, the part where, for those who may not be aware, I live in Alaska right now, and salmon is a huge part of life, your subsistence way of living. But like the life of the salmon, what's so remarkable to me is that these fish are born in a certain stream, a certain water source, and go out and explore the world. And then when they're about the end of their life, or they're ready to come home, they go back to the same stream in which they were born and birthed. And then they go up river, and then they spawn and die. So I hope that's not like my full life story, is that when I go home, I spawn and die. But that, like, the part where I really resonate with the salmon is that, they go out and explore, but then they go back home, and they know exactly which stream to go back home to. So that's the part where I really identify with the life of a salmon, because I feel like that's my life's journey, where I don't live at home. I haven't lived at home for many years. I'm exploring the ocean and learning and connecting with a lot of other native relatives. And but I know though that my goal is to go back home. And so that's how I think about that. But then I also think about this as a spider web too. When I was doing my research in my dissertation, there's this spider web concept from a fellow relative from one of the Pueblos, and she describes spider webbing like within research, that when you do research projects, like you have these strands, like, it's like results, or it's like literature review, all these different things come together that seem very messy, but at the end it creates a very beautiful spider web with these strands. So I use that in my own life's work, where I know that these different strands of my life seem very messy at times, but I know that at the very end that I'm forming and weaving this spider web that is very beautiful, very intricate, and has many different details in it. So that's how I think about my life's journey, so that I know that right now my life is to impact and connect with our community at a broader level, but I know that that's going to get more defined as I get older. And I think that comes to the point when I go back home and figure out how I connect and how do I, I do have a degree, and how does that fit within our Native communities too? How can I help serve our people, especially the youth? And so that's kind of how I think about it. Like, if I were to go home now, I don't think there's necessarily jobs for me at this moment. And so that's what makes it a little bit hard. And also, I don't think there's a house for me. Like, I'm learning all these things of like, okay, if I want to go home, do I buy a house on the res? How does that work? Do I ask for land? And I'm just learning all this stuff because it's different than like if you're gonna buy a house like in Anchorage, right, or in Albuquerque, as opposed to getting a house on the reservation, because there's all these different, lineal ties, familial ties. Like it's really, really fascinating. And within our Native community, the youngest daughter gets the property. So that's another thing too. So within each of our tribal nations too, like it's so different, right? Like I'm looking up like how to own a house, and I'm like, okay, getting all this advice from non-Native people, but I'm like, but then how does that relate to our reservation folks, like, which I ultimately want to be on the red. So it's just so fascinating. I'm like, where do I go? I was like, I need a financial advisor who's Native. I need somebody who knows about housing who's Native, like all these things. And so that's where I go to TikTok. so it's just continually like learning, right? Like, where I live now is very different, and I travel a lot. The reason why I travel is I actually have a visual impairment, and so I may lose more vision as I get older, and so I travel because I want to see as much as I can, so I can always remember what I saw. That's another part of why I travel a lot. But it's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I love that. And thank you for sharing also about your visual impairment, because I feel like that, obviously I hope that you keep your vision, but at least you'll be able to, in your older years, just as I'm getting older, my vision isn't as great as it was. Same thing. I want to be able to remember. And I think in the future, like when it comes to travel, like, am I going to be able to go on like a 16-hour flight? Already just like a 3 or 4 hour flight, I get off and like my back is hurting and like all of that. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Travel when you're young.
I'll go ahead. I'll ask the next question, but I think the next question is definitely a segue into what you said. Well, this is what popped up for me when you were talking right now. I enjoyed everything that you said, especially like the spider web thing. I was like, well, my spider web is messy, like, but it's a beautiful mess, my spider web. But anyways, when you had talked about, the different like avenues of like having to get a financial advisor, but you want to purchase a house on the res, and how do you go about that? I think there are times in my life when I like that Western perspective comes in, and for some reason it's not flowing easily, like what I'm supposed to do like in the traditional Western perspective way. And this has been me lately, where I'm trying to force my way into that world, and it's just not happening easily. And I wonder if it's just, this is my thoughts, just thinking, it's because that's not what we're meant supposed to do, and that goes into our next question, or if anyone wants to respond. But the next question was, did you have anyone to teach you your traditional ways? And how did you, if needed, to transition into Western ways of life? If anyone wants to take that, or Mandy, if you want to take that on.
I had my dad to take us back home a lot. And, Pueblo ways is a lot stricter, I guess you would say, than our Lakota ways. And I like that. I like that because I don't know why I like it. I can't tell you why I like it right now. But my dad was there to teach us our traditional ways. Um, with that, my dad didn't have his mom. His mom died when he was 14. So he was raised by his auntie, who we still recognize only as our Unci, or our Ahlu, our grandma. And I didn't know that for a very long time, but she taught us different things when we went there. And then I have um, my cousins and my other aunties, and you know, in that way, it's like the women teach the women and the men teach the men. So the women that taught me were my aunties, my other grandmas. For my mom's side, um, it's not as strict, I guess you would say. But I didn't have a lot of. I have my family back there, and you know, um, I think I learned a lot more in my Pueblo ways because my dad went back so often. My mom didn't go back as often as my dad did. However, when we did go back, my daughter was able to get an Indian name, and we did sweat, but it wasn't as strict as the ways that I was taught in my Pueblo way. And I appreciate all the things that I've learned in my Pueblo ways because it has made me the woman that I am today, and I still use a lot of um, those teachings on a daily basis. So, yes, I did have individuals to teach me traditional ways. Um, and how did it transition into Western ways? It actually has helped me. Jen, you mentioned those ancestors standing behind in res when Teeny said her introduction. But I also feel that way when I'm in front of a class, when I'm teaching, when I'm doing a workshop, when I'm talking to youth. I think of that because it's so powerful with those individuals that are standing behind them, because that's how I feel sometimes. I get like nervous, and um like what's that word, Jen, that we use all the time? Imposter syndrome. I
Mm.
get all of those things, but then when I really think about it, I I have those people that are behind me that have prayed for us to, be able to be the person that we are. So yeah, that's it. The end. Next.
I can jump in. I think as an Indigenous woman, as I occupy space in different capacities, I think one of my greatest abilities is the ability to build the confidence of our Indigenous community. I think that's so precious, and I think that that's a really needed within our communities, because I feel like if you can help build the confidence of our people, there's no telling what our relatives can do once they know that they can do it. Whatever that is, like whether if it's like going to school or getting a job or learning a traditional way, or whatever that is. And as I've thought about how I've grown up and my relatives were there, like in communities we have like 20-30 grandmas and like 30 grandpas. Like it's very hard for me to describe to other folks how our kinship works. And even when I say like, oh, that's my sister, in like the Western world, it's like, oh, that's your cousin. I'm like, well, that's my sister. Like it's just, and they're like, well, how do you have like 20 grandmas? I'm like, I don't know. Like just accept it. And then there's our clan system too, which is also another realm of understanding. And I know that I'm going to be a lifelong learner. And what happened recently, like, I think this is a really neat example. So me and my sister, grew up like participating in our traditional dances, like our social dances, our feast day dances that we have back home in our communities, our Pueblo communities. And it's just a gathering of coming together and participating in traditional dances. There's a lot of vendors selling jewelry or picadillies, all kinds of fun stuff. So it's just a day to come together. But in our feast days, like, so I went back and participated this Christmas in our ceremonies, our dances. And I went to another village in Laguna, and I haven't danced a lot in our traditional dances in the village of Laguna, but I met a young girl. She's 17, a young woman. She goes to Santa Fe Indian School, and she understood how things worked in the kiva. And I know a little bit, and from what I participated in, but I didn't know a lot of the things. And I would ask her, I'm like, hey, what's happening? Be like telling me, like, oh, this is what's happening. And it was cool because there was like this really neat, almost like a mentorship, even though she was like younger than me. She was 17 and I'm in my late 30s, right? Like, and I didn't feel bad because I knew I could ask her because I'm learning. And it was neat. Like after the end, after the 4 days we participated, like I just gave her a gift and just hugged her. I was like, I'm so thankful for you. Like you are wise beyond your years. And I just love the knowledge you shared with me because I'm learning still, right? I'm always gonna be learning. And it was just really neat. I was just so thankful for her. But it was so funny because the first night we were participating, it was Christmas Eve, and there was only a few of us dancing. And I was waiting. I got there early to the Arkiva spot. And I was waiting in the car because I was going to wait for another person to go into the Kiva, right? And so I was waiting. This other car pulled up, and we were kind of waiting for each other to get out. And I was like, I don't think these people are going to go. So I was like, well, I'll just go. I'm kind of afraid, because I'm by myself. Like I'm learning all this stuff. So get out. And then these two young girls, one of them got out, the 17-year-old, and her friend got out. And they're like, oh, we were waiting for you to get out. I was like, I was waiting for you to get out because we were kind of both scared to go in together, like. So then they were waiting for me. They're like, we don't want to go in first. So I'm like, okay, well, then I'll go in first. When you go in, everybody looks at you because you greet them and say hello, and it's kind of nerve-wracking. But so it was cool because we were both like, I led them and they led me. And so it's just this exchange. And so I don't know. That's how I think about it today, right? Like, I don't know everything. I'm not going to know everything. I don't know the language fluently, but I am willing to learn. And I think that that's a really good example from our young relative. And my other two, my friend Kia, she's from Zuni. She knows her language. She's 25, 26. And I call her my young elder because even though we're not from the same pueblo, she tells me a lot and it helps me understand who I am today. And so I'm very open to learning from all ages, including our elders and from our younger relatives too. So that's kind of how I think about this today.
Nice. I love that image of the young people, like we were waiting for you. I could totally imagine that. I wanted to share, so mine is backwards because I learned Western ways first. And that's how I was raised in a, middle class suburb in Northern California, and didn't know really anything. And back then, definitely, it was not as diverse as it is today, especially where I grew up, which is called Danville, California. Now with Silicon Valley so close, it is really diverse, but at the time it wasn't. And I remember when I was in 6th grade, a Black family moved in my neighborhood, and I was so excited because there was someone else that was of color in my neighborhood. And like, for me, it wasn't until after I graduated from college and I moved to Los Angeles, and that's where I was really able to be schooled on everything, because I came in knowing nothing. And I mean, I just knew like Dances with Wolves, and like I had been to maybe like one powwow, and I wasn't participating. I was just like looking at the vendors, so I didn't know anything. And I'm so grateful to the Los Angeles Native community because so many people basically took pity on me. They were like, this poor girl, she doesn't know anything. And April was one of my teachers. She came in and she was like, oh, because I worked with the youth. So that was what was really cool about it. It was that I worked with the Native youth. And so we were all learning together. And I'm very grateful to, back then we had an O'odham group. So not just Tohono O'odham, but Gila River, Salt River, anyone who was O'odham in the Los Angeles area, we all got together and we were able to actually bring out elders to come and like teach us things. And it was really, really cool. It's where I made my first dress, my first skirt. It's where I learned about dancing. It was just an amazing time, and being a sponge, really wanting to learn all these things, practicing things. And even if you do live on the reservation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you automatically learn your language, learn your ways, because people within my family were raised on the reservation, and even to this day, my sister is always like, go ask your auntie me. She knows about those Indian ways. And I was like, girl, you were raised on the res. Like, how come I know more than you? So, but definitely when I'm in a non-native environment, like a mainstream environment, there is that need to like to I guess the word is code switch. Like I'm able to transition like into another way of thinking, or I'm able to see how things can be perceived, but like I'm taking a step back going like, oh, okay, like I understand why they are doing this particular thing, but that's not, I say that's not how we do it, meaning as an indigenous person. But it can be tricky. But at the same time, I kind of like look at it as like all those years I feel like maybe like I was deep undercover, like I was learning all these things, and now I can share like, well, this is how the Western world thinks, this is the way that they think, and compare it like to how we think. And I'm sure everyone has seen those charts where it's like Western way, Native way, Indigenous way, and then like it shares, about how, like for instance, in the Western world, it's like, get what you can, get as much as you can, earn as much as you can, whatever you have, save it for yourself. And Indigenous way is not that. It's like, of course, get what you can, but always share what you can, give back, reciprocity, all of that. And it's interesting to me that we have that being, we started out with the land acknowledgement, that this land is the foundation, is respecting the earth, reciprocity, a respect for your elders, all these different things. And yet that is not, like, in my experience, what the mainstream world is like. As soon as people are older, they're like, okay, it's time for that person to go into a home and put them outside of society, outside of the community. And that's not our way. Our way is to integrate and honor and learn from them. Of course, if you need like medical attention, you bring somebody or take them somewhere. But like in general, I would say I'm also a lifelong learner, and I'm still learning. And just like as I was touched by Justine's introduction, like I also want to take classes and enroll in Total Optum Community College. I think they have them online. So I'm like, oh, I got to get into that and do that. So that's my answer for Western way versus Indigenous way. What's next?
No, it's a good conversation. And just like talking about lifelong learning. The reason why I started to learn Ho-Chunk, of course, because I started to learn my Dene introduction as well. But it wasn't like my grandma, as I mentioned, she passed away last year, so a year ago. But up until like, she's getting older, late 60s, she was still learning. Like she was still learning the language. And I was just like, really, I don't know. Like in my mind, it was like really amazing to me that she still wanted to learn. Like, and she had time to learn. And I remember I was at a conference one time and I met one of my relatives, and she's like, "Oh, Justine, can you ask them a question? How do you say this in Ho-Chunk?" And I asked, and then my grandma just hung up. I was like, "Okay," like that's all she wanted to know. But just being that lifelong learning journey is really important, and I think for me, it also came to learn. I think to not be I don't want to use the word shame, but to not be embarrassed that I don't know. And that was really hard because I feel like this is information I should know from my grandma and my grandpa. So I think really taking that leap of like, okay, you're not gonna be embarrassed. Just like how Mandy said, like she was learning from, you know, a 17-year-old, like, you know, just breaking that barrier is just amazing, and good things will come that way. But that's all I wanted to share. Thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, you know, in our communities, we can have a lot of lateral violence and a lot of shaming if we don't know these particular things. And I know I've gone through that. And I think now we are more equipped to be encouraging and supportive. And like, yeah, there are a lot of things that we don't know. And a lot of the reasons why we don't know them is because of what happened historically to our people. So I if anyone's listening, I want to encourage everyone to like to go out on that limb, just like Justine did, you know, and to learn your ways, whatever they are, because I know I have a lot to learn. And I'm still learning and will continue to learn, hopefully until, you know, I'm in my much older age. So,
Sorry, I want to share this one story before we go to our next question. So when I was younger, I remember going to an event and I was gifted pinon seeds. And then I asked Jennifer, I was like, what are these? And, you know, I'm Danae. So she was like, you don't know what they are? So like, okay, we'll go ask. So she took me to Eric, and Eric, who's also Danae, explained it to me. But just like in that space where like Jennifer made it for a safe space for me to ask and to be led to someone was like just amazing. I think that starts, you know, when people like y'all create that space, it allows for healing to happen.
oh, I like that. The healing. Yeah, it is healing, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It is healing. I don't remember that, but I'm glad that happened. Ooh, I like this question.
Before we go into this question, I do want to ask Dr. Mandy, when you do work with youth, do you feel like a comfortable space is needed for them to feel comfortable with you and to grow with you?
I think from the very get-go, you have to create the space that you want them, how you want them to be. I don't you have to, it's just like, it's like that's true for any audience, right? Like when you're giving a presentation or you go into a learning space, like you're the one that sets the tone because they're looking at you, right? Especially for Native youth, what I've learned is that a lot of our Native youth are, I feel like collectively more on the quiet side, I'd say. Not everybody, but I feel like when I go into these learning spaces, it's definitely more reserved for sure. But when I come into these spaces, how I build that, I typically start with kind words, is what I call it. And right off the bat, I just, you know, tell them like that you are loved, that you are worthy, that you are magnificent, that you are intelligent, all these you are's, because I genuinely believe in that for our Native people, our Native learners, and beyond. And so when I come into those spaces, I know that I have to create that environment like pretty quickly, because a lot of the spaces I'm in are learning spaces, right? Like schools. And so I think it was outside the school context, it definitely would be different. It is different, but I don't know, like I feel like once you build a space to help them share their stories, I feel like it opens up more. You can do that, like go out and take 10 pictures within this classroom that resonate with you. Okay. Go make a 30-second video of you introducing yourself, right? You know, like you draw a picture on the board that is a cultural artifact from your community. You know, there's so many different ways you can do that, right? Like, or write down 10 words that resonate with you as part of your value system. You know, so it's like, how do you, there's so many ways to do that, right? How do you draw out of them like their story? I think that's so important. So I think there's so many ways to do that. And I think from there is when you start cultivating that trust. And again, I think that vulnerability helps for our Native community, like especially the youth. Because when I share with, like, you know, I wasn't always like this. Like I wasn't always comfortable talking in front of people. This is what I was like in middle school, very introverted, very scared and timid, you know, but I learned how to communicate with folks. And so that's kind of how I approach it. You know, I think about what I wanted to hear as a learner when I was their age, and that really helps me form curriculum or form activities as we go into these spaces. And that's true for adults too.
Thank you for
Yeah,
saying
that's
that. I
true.
know there's a lot of people out there that want to connect with different individuals, but that just don't do it their way. I recently got a contract. I do a lot of different contracts with a lot of different individuals. So I have a contract with an organization. It's called Native Ways to College, and it helps middle school and high school kids. With their journey of education and to go into secondary learning. And I started at the end of January. And I think that because I have a good relationship with a lot of individuals in community, individuals are like, they trust me, you know, but I also went into a conversation with somebody that I haven't had a communication with for like 6 months or maybe even a year. So when I call them, it's more like me visiting with them before asking, hey, do you want to sign up for this? You know, that's not my style. It's more like, let's visit, let's chat, let me find out how your family is. And then I'll go into what I need to ask you. So that's the reason, one of the main reasons that I ask you, because a lot of people, Western ways, want what they want right away, and that's all. You know, they don't think of the other person and their thoughts or their feelings. It's just more, give me what I need, give me what I want. But I appreciate your response, because when we do work with individuals, a lot of individuals are shy, they are timid, they're like, maybe not necessarily believe in themselves to do what they think that they can do or what needs to be done. So hearing with your heart words, or you know, those you words, you are, helps that. And I would hope that more individuals would use that approach than just their demanding approach. So thank you for sharing.
Mm.
So the next question is it important to make a distinction between the two worlds, and should they be separated or combined? Why or why not? Jen, I'm going to call on you.
Okay. I I I think I wish I lived in a world where we didn't have to make the distinction, but I I'm just thinking about my families, and how they may not know about like Indian way, just different Indian ways, and so it's really like hitting me hard right now, because I'm like, I can jump into their ways, whatever their ways are. I'm thinking more specifically like mainstream culture or Filipino culture, because Glenn is Filipino. But then are they able to jump into my ways? And I'm not seeing that, but then that's partly me for not like educating. Um, I think that there are two worlds, definitely. But I think it's not just native. I think it's like all cultures that keep their um, practices alive today. Um, they have, just I'll take Filipino for example. Like there are a lot of Filipino, just like us, like Filipino sayings, Filipino foods, Filipino ways of life, things that you do. And so I think that they're definitely, for them, they have two worlds as well. We have two worlds, but I wish we were in a world where it could be combined and where everyone respected that people have like the world that our shared world, our mainstream world, but then respect the fact that that individuals also have like their cultural background wherever they come from. So I guess in that way, the question is, should they be separate or combined? Um, I think that they could be combined, but they are separate. Why are they separate? I think it's just because people sometimes in the mainstream world, I find that people that might be not so accepting of cultural ways, sometimes one thing that they have in common is that they themselves don't know about their own cultural ways wherever their people are from. And so when people that are really tied to their culture come into their world, they are against it because it's a reminder subconsciously that they may not know their ways. And that can be uncomfortable. I think that's one of the reasons why all this genetic testing, like 23andMe and whatnot, is like so popular right now. For where a lot of indigenous people, just like Dr. Mandy said, she's like, I've always known, I've known, like you, it's just like we know we're a part of it. So I'm not sure if I truly answered the question, but those are my thoughts about the question.
Thank you for sharing, Jen. I know that this two worlds thinking, I've only probably thought this way as two worlds for about less than 15 years. I'd say more than 10, less than 15. And the reason that I say that is because I can distinctly remember when the two worlds things hit me. My dad was on his deathbed and he was at the hospital, and he said, I've already made peace with my God and I've already made peace with my Indian God. So I'm okay to go. To me, I was like, that's two different things, you know? Those are two different worlds. And the next question, and a question later on, we'll be talking about, the Bible and your ways of learning and stuff. Anyways, so those two things are two separate things. I think some people might not know about living in two worlds. They might just think that it's just the way that it is. But if I can separate my dad making peace with his Indian God and the regular God, that's me knowing like I need to separate my Indian world with my Western world, but also at the same time walking in this world as an indigenous woman. You know, it's just how I make it. I can understand your ways are your ways, but this is what I've come to know and what I've come to learn. So, it is it important to make a distinction? I think for some people it might. For me, it's like I know that it's two separate things, and I know that I need to combine them. And what's the best thing to do that? That's my decision and my response to whatever it is that I'm in or the place that I'm at. Um, so So to answer your question or to answer the question, um, for me, I think it's just about me making a distinction that I come from two different worlds, a Western and a traditional world, and I'm somewhere in the middle. That's it. The end. La la la.
I think this is so complicated. I think there's just so many realms and layers and just kind of the onion pulling back and all kinds of stuff. I think about it like so I started therapy a year ago here in Alaska, which is a specific type called dialectic therapy, like where two things can coexist at one time and not necessarily be two extremes. And so I think that's like really helpful for me because like even how I would respond to like trauma in my own life, it would either be either that or that, and there was nothing in the middle. And so then I've untangled that a lot as I've like learned how to manage my emotions a little bit better. So like even thinking about like the relationship with my dad, right? Like I don't have a relationship with him. I'm very mad at him, but I honor him that I was brought into this world. Like those can coexist together. And so when I think about this question, I think about them coexisting together in this binary, really, but that there's a lot of gray in between. Because right, like there was one elder who was a few years ago, and I respect his viewpoint, and he said, I try to live my life the way it was before colonization was here. Totally respect that. He didn't celebrate Christmas, any kind of holidays or anything. But then again, I saw him drive up in his nice, Ford F-150 truck, and I'm like, I don't know, like, like I'm here with my tablet, right? But I know who I am as an indigenous person, right? I did my taxes last night as a part of a citizen in this country, as a part of a member of a nation, so it's like it's so messy. And I think that's that spider web again. Like it's just all these strands. I'm just like, I don't know. I just know that like I can center myself, position myself in these spaces where I feel like I always have to be representing though. That's definitely a burden that I feel like as an indigenous person. And I think a lot of people of color feel that too in other spaces. So I don't know, like I know that I can center myself and then teach others how to do that for those that want to learn how to do that. So that's kind of how I think about this question. Like, because it's fluid to me a little bit more, like because I know that I have my values, but I'm also maneuvering this world, trying to figure out how to do taxes, right? When I have a Roth IRA, which I'm still learning about, So it's like, okay, I don't know. So I don't know. I think of it just kind of fluid and knowing that all these things can coexist together. That's how I think about
I love that. Thank you. I wanted to share that one of the first time that I heard this term two worlds was actually a youth who wrote a poem about it. Now she's a really accomplished filmmaker. Her name's Leah Hale. But at the time she was a teenager and she shared this poem about two worlds and about how like on the weekend she goes to the powwows, but during the week she's at school talking about like this and that and like just the the differences as a teenager, her two different worlds. And it really struck me. And then I realized like, oh, that's a term, like a general term. It's not just like, it's not something that Leah made up. It was like, oh, okay, I get it. And I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray. And I'm comfortable with the gray. And I think I've had to learn to be comfortable a lot in my life. Okay, what's next, April?
The next question is, what is one lesson from your traditional world that you would like people to know about in the Western world?
I'll take this one because
Go
I
ahead.
could think of the one that just like was instantaneous to me. One thing that I really honor and respect and practice is for, I'm going to speak about my tribe, Tohono. When we experience the death, and I know many other tribes do the same thing, we cut our hair, and when our hair grows out is like when we're out of mourning. And I think it's beautiful that I remember the first time I cut my hair when my father passed, and I was living here, and many of my close friends were on the continent. And when we would Zoom, they would see my hair and they'd be like, oh my God, what happened? Like immediately. And recently, I also had another death in our family, and I did cut my hair, and I have more friends here now that are not Native. And they were like, oh my God, I love your hair. What made you do it? Was there like, it was like a completely different way of like approaching my hair, which is something that is like the first thing that you see, right? And I just think that would be, I think it's good a lot of times in our mainstream culture, we're kind of like encouraged to quickly like go back, like, get over the death, or if you give birth, like quickly snap back. Your body has to snap back. And I think that there can be a lot of learning and peace and whatnot, like great things that can happen while you're in that journey of mourning or of like, becoming, enjoying motherhood and whatnot. So I think that would be a great lesson for people to learn, like that really take the time to mourn that loss, whatever that loss was. And yeah, I think that would be mine.
I like that, Jen. Thanks for sharing. I think one of the things that one lesson that I from a traditional world that I would like to share with people in the Western world is, and I don't even know if people do this now, or some people may or may not, but a spirit plate. A spirit plate is usually when individuals take a piece of each piece of food, and in different areas that I've been, it's like done on Thanksgiving or it's done on Christmas. It's done on a major holiday. But for me, I do it for every meal. And I don't make a big old thing about it. I just, even if I'm at a restaurant, I'll take a piece of each piece of my food and just put it to the side or put it in a napkin and say a prayer. Um, to me, that is one way of continually doing it for every meal that I have. Even if it's just a piece of, a small piece, it's still acknowledging those individuals, those ancestors. I'm still feeding them as they feed me in whatever capacity that is, from learning to language to still giving them thanks for making me the person that I am. So that's the one lesson or tradition that I'd like to share.
I'd like to share kind of off of what Jen was saying about I was thinking about like the ceremonies of like around death or even around like weddings or other things. Like I think it's very interesting. Like I feel like a value within our native communities is it just matters that you're there. And it's almost like it doesn't matter what you look like or what you're wearing. Like there's a very stark difference as I've seen like in regards to like funerals, right? Within our native communities, what I've seen is that what matters is you're there. Like you'll see a lot of folks in like jeans or even sometimes shorts, just t-shirt, right? Like, but they're there with the community to help or to be a part of the celebration. And then what I've seen with like non-native funerals is that it's very different type of environment where one time I went to a funeral and I had a black dress on and I had a scarf that was turquoise. And somebody told me, they're like, no, take off your scarf because you're supposed to be in all black. And I'm like, what? Like, that was such a huge shock to me. I'm like, it, I'm like, doesn't it just matter that I'm going? Like, and that's very different. And I think about that a lot too. Or even for weddings too, I feel like there are far and few within my family at least, but all that matters is you're there. People come up in like, jeans. The grandpas have jeans on, their cowboys hats, like, and that's a part of the community. Like, where in other places I've seen it a little bit different and a little more strict, I think, depending on even the religious affiliation too. So I don't know. I think what matters is that you show up and you're a part of the community. I really appreciate that value. Come as you are, come eat, come on, let's go, let's just talk, right? Like I think that's a big part of our community. And I think a lot of the Latino Latinx community is also similar too. I think there's other communities that have similar values about, just come help, come be a part of the community. So I really value that.
I love that.
Awesome. So we're going to be going to our last question. It's coming to the end of our programming, but this last question is, have you ever had a struggle between traditional ways of spirituality versus religion and church? I think going back to what I said about my dad and him saying, I'm okay because I've made peace with my Indian God, and I'm okay because I've made peace with God. I think then was okay for me to not be okay or be okay with the Bible, because my mom was very much into going to a church at that time, or a Christian church. And one of the things that I want to say is this church that I went to, they had international support group where they had different individuals from different ethnicities at this table, and we would just be writing cards to different people, yet we would talk about who we are and where we came from. One of the things I want to say is that I know that my tribe is older than the Bible. So that doesn't mean that I have to um really abide by this guideline or this Bible, because our ways was way before that. Um, One of the things that I have struggled in the past before all of this was, in the Bible it says you can only praise one God, and that's not the ways in the traditional ways that I've been taught. There are different, you know, different things that we're taught in that way. But before my dad's passing, I did struggle a lot with like the Bible and all of that. But after my dad's passing, I did understand like our ways are our ways, and I don't need to struggle between them. I can use them to help me understand who I am as a person. Thank the creator or God. I don't necessarily say God, but I say creator. Um, so that's my answer. The end. Passing it on.
Um, I think this is so confusing to me, honestly. Like I think a lot of people identify with what I feel too, just being like, I don't know, because within our native history, like there's been so many infractions and so many horrible things done by denominations from gosh, yeah, and I think that history is really sad and so tragic, and how yeah, so I don't know. I think with all of this, like I was a part of a church when I went to college, and I was a part of a church for like 16 years, and that was like a lot of my 20s and then my 30s, and then I left the church in like 2020, but it was very traumatic. It's mixed experiences where it was very traumatic, but then also very like life-giving in many ways. I met a lot of really awesome people that are my friends now and have helped me and grow and stuff. And I think it's very complicated, honestly. Like I'm still learning about what I feel about all of this, and I acknowledge that there's a creator, because there's in my mind there's no way that all this stuff could be fit together so perfectly. Like how the body is formed and like how nature operates and how there's a natural order to it. Like I don't think that's by accident. And so I think that's too bad that the creator made that. But I'm figuring it out, like as I go back home and participate in different dances. It just I learn a lot there too. And so I don't know, I'm lost in this capacity. So I'll just be forward with that and just trying to figure this out. And I don't know. That's my response right now. So ask me in like 5 years, maybe it'll change. I don't know.
I agree. I asked me in 5 years, but for sure, I went to Catholic high school and Christian university, and although being raised, we were never like a church family. When I started asking questions, my dad was like, these are good questions. Let's go see if you want to find a church. And we took like every weekend we would go to a different place, and we would like go visit different churches or mosques or synagogues, like whatever. And I never found one that I really, really liked, because I didn't really know what I was looking for. And even when I was in high school and college, I still never felt like this is like you can feel it in your heart. The only time I ever did feel it was when I was with Agape, which is in Los Angeles, with Dr. Michael Beckwith, and that was the only time that I ever really felt like this could be like my spiritual home, or whatever you want to call it. And currently now in Oahu, I'm a part of Windward, New Hope Windward Church, and I'm enjoying it. I'm liking it. I'm very open to the possibility that something might happen, and I'll be like, nope, this isn't the place for me. But I know that like automatically today when you asked me to do the prayer, like I went with like creator and sage, and like that's just kind of like what's in me. And I don't know, I am very confused, and like I don't really know. I know that like with my church group, like it's very Bible and Jesus heavy, and I'm okay with that, but like I struggle to even just be okay with it. Um, and when I'm with my, oh yeah, I wanted to share this. So earlier in like the early 2000s, I was a consultant also, and I mostly contracted with White Bison, which is a native wellness group. And I was very privileged to be able to travel to so many different reservations and spend, we weren't just there for a couple of days, we were usually there for a week or more. And the communities that we visited would always welcome us in, and they would let us be a part of their ceremonies, or sometimes they would hold like sweat just for us. And it was really beautiful to be able to go like so many different places. I did that for many, many years. And I mean, the one thing that I really could say that was like throughout, whether I was in the Northwest or whether I was, in the South or wherever I was just a respect for all living things. And I feel like sometimes in Western way of thinking, just in general, there isn't that respect for, you know, the land or the animals or just other ways of life. Like my way of life is the only way. And I don't, that makes me uncomfortable. I don't like that. I want to respect everything and everyone. And so I'm not sure where to end other than just like that's my answer. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for answering these questions. Thank you, Mandy, for being here. Continue to
Yeah.
do an awesome job on TikTok. Continue to, I love your platform, and when getting ready for this visit, I've let some other people know that we were going to have you, and they were like, "I love her platform." You
Oh,
know,
that's
yeah,
cool.
so thank you so much for your contributions to the to that platform, and allowing us to see the world through your eyes, and also um being a great advocate for those individuals for education. um I don't know if you want to share any last things before we go, but please, if you do, this would be your time.
Yeah, thank you. I just honor both of you and just the space that you create here. It's really, really special. I think that more spaces like this are needed among our Native community, and so I just appreciate how you came together as a collective and are sharing stories. I think that's so powerful. So thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Jen, you have anything?
um I mean, I'm so excited that we had a chance. You're like our first like big celebrity guest, so it was like it was really excited. I'm like, I don't think she's gonna like give us a time of day, but you said yes, so thank you so much. And we didn't even get to talk about like film and media because I went on your website and I saw your awesome film. It looks beautiful. It's like is that in 4K? I'm pretty sure, because I was like, oh man, and the music choice and everything, just like it was just great. So
With a
I'm so
GoPro.
grateful.
As a GoPro.
And
Yeah, it was
GoPro,
the
GoPro. Okay. Um, for sure. Yeah, I really am just happy that we were able to connect today. Thank you so much for saying yes. And thank you, April, for bringing everybody together. And Justine, I know you had mommy duty, so you were kind of silently were able to slip out. But thank you, Justine, for also being here with us today.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Don't forget to join us on our next visit on March 7th at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. We're thankful that you all are here. You can thank you if you're watching this in real time or in the replay. We just want to make sure that you all we just want to make sure that you all are remember to know that you're loved. To remember to know that you're powerful. Remember to know that you are right where you need to be, but there's always bigger things that can happen once you put the work into it. I just want to say ta'a pila mai ai, gracias a tiehe. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you on March 7th. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.